YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Master That English, where we understand, analyze, and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today will be the analysis of the play written by the Bengali writer Badal Sircar, which is Evam Indrajit. So get your pens and notepads ready because here we go. Who is Badal Sircar? Badal Sircar was born as Suhindranath Sircar in Calcutta in the year 1925 and he died in 2011. He studied civil engineering before becoming a playwright. While working in England and Nigeria, he developed a strong interest in theatre. In 1967, he started his own theatre group called Shatabdi. He believed in learning throughout life and earned a master's degree in comparative literature at the age of 67. He received the Padma Shri in 1972 and the Sangeet Natak Academy Fellowship also. However, he politely refused the Padma Bhushan in the year 2010. Let us now understand why is Badal Sircar called the father of third theatre. Badal Sircar changed Indian theatre by creating a third theatre, also called Angan Manch or courtyard theatre. He did not like the Western style stage that was the first theatre, or even the commercial folk theatre like Jatra, which is the second theatre. He rejected expensive stage productions. His plays used very few lights, costumes, and props. They could be performed in parks, streets, courtyards, or any open space. Sircar believed that theatre should belong to everyone, not just those who could afford tickets. So he created Third Theatre, where plays were performed in open spaces. This allowed actors and audiences to interact closely and make theatre simple, affordable, and democratic. He wanted theatre to spread social awareness and connect directly with ordinary people. He wrote about ordinary middle-class life, and he was influenced by existentialism and theatre of absurd, which were the modernist modes of writing in the West. Now let us understand, how does third theatre act as an agitprop or agitation propaganda form of theatre? Badal Sircar's third theatre turned theatre into a powerful tool for social and political awareness. Instead of being just entertainment, he encouraged people to question injustice and take action. Developed during the political unrest of the 1970s Naxalite movement and the emergency, it rejected expensive commercial theatre and reached ordinary people. This is why we see simple and low-cost theatre. There is no costly sets, lights, or elaborate costumes. We also see that the plays could be performed anywhere, whether it is a street, park, village, or slums. And there was a free and donation-based performances that made the theatre accessible to everyone. What is beautiful about this form of theatre is that audience also participated. Actors performed close to the audience, instead on a raised stage. They spoke directly to the audience and involved them in the performance. This made spectators think about social and political issues instead of just watching. The focus was on social injustice in most of his plays, as Sircar highlighted poverty, inequality, exploitation, and class struggle. His plays gave a voice to workers, farmers, and the marginalized people. Actors often use their own bodies as props, showing how ordinary people are treated as tools of society. Here are some of the examples where we see social injustice in his play. There is a play called Milchill, that is also known as Procession, that criticized urban life, violence, and social inequality. We also have a play called Bhuma that showed the suffering of poor rural workers and the gap between villages and cities. There is another play called Spartacus that used the story of a slave revolt to inspire resistance against oppression. In this way, third theatre was not just a style of acting, it was a movement for social change. By making theatre simple, accessible, and interactive, Badal Sircar encouraged people to question injustice, think critically, and work towards a more equal society. Let us now understand what are his major plays and what are the themes in these plays. Badal Sircar wrote more than 50 plays and
become famous.
during the political unrest of the 1960s and 1970s. Evam Indrajit was published in the year 1962. That is his best known play. In his later plays, he used simple and experimental theatre to discuss social and political problems. Some important plays are Mitchell, that is Procession, Boomer, and Spartacus. Evam Indrajit was published in Bengali initially in the year 1963 by the writer, but this work became so popular that it was also translated in Hindi by Pratibha Agarwal and in English by the writer Girish Karnad. It was presented by the Madras Players at the Museum Theatre in the year 1970 in Madras. This play was directed by Girish Karnad and Amu Matthew. Let us try to understand what is the historical context of the play Evam Indrajit. This play was written after India's independence. That was the time of rapid urbanization and growth of office culture. City life had become mechanical, resulting in middle class frustration and loss of individuality. The play reflects the emotional crisis of educated youth. Let us also see the summary of Evam Indrajit. Evam Indrajit, originally known as Ebong Indrajit, in the year 1963, is a famous three-act absurdist play by Badal Sircar. The title Evam Indrajit means and Indrajit. It suggests that Indrajit is not a special or unique person. Instead, he represents one of the many ordinary people who become trapped in the routine of everyday life. He is like a small, unimportant part of a large society, showing that many people share the same struggles and identity crisis. In Act 1, we see the concept of youth and conformity. The play begins with a writer who is unable to write a meaningful play. He feels frustrated because he has not experienced real suffering. We also have a woman named Manasi who acts like his inspiration or muse, encouraging him to write about ordinary people. The writer calls four young men from the audience. We have Amal, Vimal, Kamal, and Nirmal. But the writer suspects that Nirmal is hiding his real identity. Then Nirmal admits that his real name is Indrajit, but he uses another name because he is afraid of being different from others. The play shows the childhood and education of four men. Amal, Vimal, and Kamal happily accept society's rules and follow the usual path of life. However, Indrajit begins to question why life is so repetitive and what is the real purpose of it. This is the central idea, where through Indrajit we notice the idea of individuality, and through the other characters, that is Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, we see the idea of conformity. Then in Act 2, which is adulthood, we see the dreams and disappointments in the characters. Here, the four men grow up and begin working. Amal, Vimal, and Kamal become ordinary office workers, focused on jobs, promotions, money, and family life. But Indrajit falls in love with Manasi. However, they cannot marry because she is his maternal cousin, and society does not accept such a marriage. Feeling trapped, Indrajit tries to escape his boring life. He travels to London and other foreign countries, hoping to find freedom and happiness. Instead, he realizes that people everywhere live the same mechanical and routine lives. He understands that changing places cannot solve his inner emptiness. And this is how the central idea of Act 2 is that escaping physically does not solve inner emptiness. And this is what we all need to learn. In Act 3, we see the old age, which comes with acceptance. Time passes, and all four men become old. Amal, Vimal, and Kamal are satisfied with their ordinary lives. They have jobs, families, houses, and savings. Indrajit also returns, tired and deeply disappointed with life. He even thinks about ending his life because everything seems meaningless. He meets the writer again. Both realize that there is no perfect escape from the repetitive cycle of life. Finally, Indrajit gives up his struggle and accepts life like everyone else. He becomes an ordinary man called Nirmal, symbolizing the loss of his unique identity. So, the ending message in this play is life continues despite its uncertainties. And this is how we can understand that the main characters have a special role throughout the play. We have the writer, who is the artist searching for meaning. We have Manasi, who represents hope, inspiration, and ideal love. On the other hand, the four male characters, Amal represents the ordinary middle class man, Vimal is the blind social conformity, and Kamal is the repetitive routine life. When we see Indrajit, he is the individual who is searching for identity. And later, Indrajit transforms into Nirmal, who is the ordinary social identity. And this is why it is important for us to see why does the writer call Amal, Vimal, and Kamal and Indrajit from the audience. The writer calls all these four characters from the audience to break the usual stage rules and show the boring, repetitive life of ordinary people. He also wishes to overcome writer's block. The writer cannot think of a story. His friend Manasi suggests that he should write about ordinary people that are sitting in the audience instead of heroes or rich and poor people. And so, to represent ordinary people, Amal, Vimal, and Kamal represent the educated middle class people of post-independent India. Their lives follow the same pattern. from school to college, from college to job, from job to marriage, from marriage to ultimately having a family of their own. By choosing people from the audience, Sarkar shows that the audience's lives are just like theirs. And most importantly, Sarkar wishes to break the fourth wall. Sarkar removes the barrier between the actors and the audience. This makes the audience think about their own lives instead of just watching a play. It is an important feature of his experimental third theatre style. And he wishes to show Indrajit as different. Whereas Amal, Vimal, and Kamal accept society's rules without questioning them. Indrajit first hides behind the name Nirmal, just trying to fit in. But the writer makes him reveal his real name, Indrajit, showing that he is different. Unlike the others, Indrajit questions life and feels trapped by its meaningless. This is why, in Act 2, as Indrajit realizes that aging and routine are catching up to him, he expresses the physical and mental weight of life that leads nowhere.
I am tired, Mansi, terribly tired. Day after day, the same road, same desk, the same face in the mirror. I ran away to London. I ran away to Kuwait. But the desk followed me there too. There is no escape from the circle.
This dialogue highlights that his exhaustion is geographical as well as mental. He realizes that changing his location does not change the existential void of the modern capitalist routine. Then, what we need to understand after this is in what context does the writer refer to the myth of Sisyphus towards the end of the play? And how does it relate to Indrajit's tired attitude towards life? The concept of the myth of Sisyphus, an absurdity, has been inspired from the writer Albert Camus. Camus defined the word absurd as the conflict between human tendency to seek inherent meaning and the silent, meaningless universe. Camus' reaction is the post-war phase of life, which is an endless cycle, where just like the mythical character Sisyphus, who is forced to push a huge rock up a hill again and again forever, the characters Amal, Vimal and Kamal also repeat the same mundane life that cycles again and again. They study, they get their jobs, they get married, they age without any higher purpose. On the other hand, Indrajit's resistance attempts to rebel against the mechanical routine of society. But he realizes his rebellion cannot break the loop. And this is how we finally see the final acceptance by the end of the play, where the writer and Indrajit both accept that there is no geographical destination. So just like Sisyphus, even though life feels meaningless, they continue living and facing their struggles. This is why the writer says,
We are all cursed spirits of Sisyphus.
and Indrajit also famously remarks,
Everything is a circle. One goes ahead, comes back to the same place, and then again starts again.
Similarly, the struggle of writing the play underscores the struggle of life itself. When the writer remarks on Indrajit's shifting identity,
The more lines I write for him, the more he stands outside them. Says they are not real. Oh, he knows too much, altogether too much.
so this is why, by the end of the play, Amal, Vimal, and Kamal are trapped in their routine lives, whereas Indrajit with the writer's guidance, understands that life may be repetitive, like Sisyphus endlessly pushing a rock uphill. Unlike Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, who find comfort in forgetting their dreams, Indrajit's memory is his curse. He tells Manasi,
The others can sleep, Manasi. They don't remember what they wanted to be when they were 20. But I remember, and that memory makes my feet heavy. I can carry the corpse of my youth on my back.
Here, Sarkar uses the metaphor of the corpse to show that Indrajit's exhaustion is a direct result of his awareness. His inability to conform completely, combined with his inability to break free, leaves him utterly spent. Instead of giving up, he chooses to continue living with full awareness, making his struggle an act of courage and resistance. So we should now try to understand, how does Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of existence precedes essence relate to the characters in the play? Sartre, just like Camus, was an existentialist writer who argued that humans are not born with a predefined purpose. We must define ourselves through our choices and actions. And this is where the crisis of identity emerges, as Indrajit rejects the name Nirmal because he wants to escape the ordinary life. By choosing the name Indrajit, the conqueror of Indra, he attempts to create his own identity. We also see the concept of bad faith. Sartre had used this term to describe people who mimic societal roles instead of living authentically. We can see that Amal, Vimal, and Kamal embody bad faith. They completely surrender their individuality to become like machines following the system. We see that they have a burden of freedom. Indrajit suffers because he realizes he is free to choose, yet he cannot find a meaningful purpose in life. We see existential despair and alienation. Both Camus and Sartre focused on the deep sense of isolation that comes with existential realization. We also see social alienation. Indrajit feels deeply disconnected from his family, friends, and even Manasi, the woman he loves. He feels lonely because he questions society, while others simply accept. When Indrajit tries to seek comfort in his relationship with Manasi, he realizes that even love cannot bridge his isolation or cure his fatigue.
Even talking to you requires an effort now. Words have lost their meaning. We say the same things every time we meet. Love, marriage, and society, rules. I feel like an old machine clicking the same gears until it breaks.
The burden of consciousness is what we see in Indrajit, who realizes that knowledge comes with a heavy price.
If I hadn't tasted the fruit of knowledge, I could have gone on living in this paradise of your blessed society.
And this is how we see the meta-theatrical void. The character of the writer represents the existential creator. He sits on the empty stage, struggling with a blank page, reflecting the existential dread of creating meaning out of absolute.
Amal, Vimal, Kamal, and Indrajit, I know them. They are me. They are you. They study, pass exams, look for jobs, get married, and then die.
Now the question is, why are we giving importance to existentialist writers? And in certain ways, why does this play, Evam Indrajit, support Western absurdism over Indian samsara. Badal Sircar brilliantly merges Western existentialism with traditional Indian philosophy, creating a unique cultural hybrid on stage. Sarkar synthesizes this idea through the character Indrajit, who is trapped in both existential and cultural realm. He cannot escape the loop as there is no moksha. This is where Indrajit says,
I am Nirmal, I am Amal, Bimal, Kamal, I am ordinary.
this is where we see the structural parallel. Both Western and Indian concepts view human life as a repetitive, painful loop. Camus uses Sisyphus pushing a boulder. Hinduism uses samsara, the endless wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. This is where Sarkar synthesizes this concept. Sarkar talks about samsara, but without the promise of moksha. So Indrajit is trapped in a modern wheel of rebirth, but there is no escape as there is no moksha.
The same old road. I walk and walk and walk, I keep on walking, yet there is no escape.
So is the writer a manipulative narrator? Badal Sarkar uses the character of the writer not just as a storyteller, but as an aggressive puppet master who is a figure that controls, fragments, and exposes both Indrajit and Manasi. The writer is able to represent Indrajit as the alter ego. How so? Because the writer is able to remove the false identity that Indrajit had initially. He was the one who questions him until he admits his real name is Indrajit. This shows that the writer does not allow his character to hide behind false identity. To a certain extent, the writer has a powerful tool to control time also. And that is what makes his characters move quickly through different stages of life. In a short time, we experience their entire life. Their experience in the field of education, how they challenge life through their job, how do they experience relationships and marriage, and also their old age. Even when Indrajit wants to stop and rest, the writer forces life to move on. And this is how he shows that time never stops for anyone. So, to a certain extent, the writer breaks Indrajit's illusions. Indrajit believes that he has finally married Manasi and achieved happiness. But the writer tells him that this is not the same ideal Manasi he dreamed about. Instead, she has become just another ordinary wife. And this is how the writer makes Indrajit realize that his perfect dream can never be fully achieved. To a certain extent, the writer is Indrajit's mirror, as Indrajit represents the writer's own thoughts and struggle. The writer's fear, confusion, and search for meaning are reflected in Indrajit. This is how he becomes the alter ego for the writer. And by challenging Indrajit, the writer is actually questioning himself and trying to understand how to live in a meaningless world. The writer acts like a creator, guide, and critic. He is controlling Indrajit's life, removing his false beliefs, and forces him to face reality. Through Indrajit, the writer also explores his own existential doubts and search for meaning.
There is no address, there is no home. We are the people of the road.
These lines remind me of the famous post-war work that is Waiting for Godot, which is also written by an existential writer, Samuel Beckett, where the road represents uncertainty. This is where we should also try to understand that why does the writer's relationship with the characters vary? We saw that the writer has a certain soft corner for Indrajit because he is like his alter ego. And on the other hand, the way he treats Amal, Vimal, and Kamal is very different. Why do we see this difference? Because in the characters Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, we see they are the puppets that follow the control of the writer. They do not question, just like the puppets follow the guidance of the puppeteer. They do not see boredom and dismissal. They accept the things for the way they are. And they are almost the same people throughout their life because they do not expect any change in their life. On the other hand, when we see Indrajit, we see the similar layer of optimism, fascination, the desire for change. That is what makes him a doppelganger of the writer. And even the repressed thoughts of the writer are seemingly expressed with greater detail in Indrajit than the writer himself. This is how Indrajit is different. He is constantly thinking about the meaning of life, which makes him lonely and unhappy, just like the writer who does not have the words to express in this world of nothingness. So the writer is strict with Indrajit because he wants him to face reality instead of running away from it. And to a certain extent, he is helping Indrajit because by accepting struggles, we can continue to move forward with a greater sense of pride. The writer also finds the strength to continue writing himself just by looking at Indrajit, who is a doppelganger reflection of him. So in the end, we see that the writer and Indrajit become companions who choose to keep walking through life with awareness and courage. Let us now try to analyze another perspective. How does Badal Sircar use the stage? And how does the minimalistic stage design in Evam Indrajit serve as an early foundation for the third theatre, or Angan Manch? Badal Sircar was trained as a civil engineer and urban planner. He worked with organizations such as the Calcutta Metropolitan Planning Organization, so his knowledge of cities and urban spaces greatly influenced his plays. Instead of using the stage as just a place where the story happens, Sircar used space and movement to show the mental and emotional condition of post-independence Indian youth. The stage itself became a symbol of their feelings of being trapped, isolated, and without direction. For instance, we see the empty stage as a symbol of modern life. Sircar removed elaborate sets, decorations, and heavy props from the stage. He used only a few simple objects like tables and chairs. The bare stage with simple furniture represents places such as offices, classrooms, and meeting rooms. The empty stage reflects the cold and mechanical nature of modern bureaucratic life. With no visual distractions, the audience focuses on characters' loneliness and feels how trapped they are in a large, impersonal system. By leaving the stage bare and exposed, Sarkar visually strips the artificial illusions of life. The empty stage mirrors the core existential premise of the play that life has no predetermined meaning. Humans are left entirely exposed to face their own blank reality. We also see the road that is a symbol of life. As an urban planner, Sarkar knew that roads are meant to connect places and lead people to destination. In Evam Indrajit, he gives the road a different meaning. He uses closed traffic loops to symbolize circular, repetitive human life. And so, in the case of Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, follow the same predictable path in life. They follow school, college, and office. Their lives are trapped in the same routine, showing how modern society can make people feel stuck, without progress or purpose. As there is no destination, the road is the destination. Thus, the road represents life's endless journey without a final goal or clear purpose. We also see crowded city and lonely people. As an urban planner, Sarkar saw the overcrowding and the poor living conditions of 1960s Calcutta. Many characters stand together on stage and often speak in repeated chorus-like dialogues, creating the feeling of a crowded city. Although the characters are physically close to one another, they remain emotionally disconnected and lonely. Sarkar shows that people can live in crowded cities, yet still feel isolated, lost, and without meaningful human connections. This is where he highlights the shared space, which is by breaking the fourth wall. Where there is no structural barrier separating the performers from the audience. He deliberately brings characters directly from the audience's seat. The stage proves that the theatre is a microcosm of society. The audience cannot remain passive observers and are forced to look at the actors and realize that they are looking at a mirror of their own mundane lives. We also see spatial fluidity and placelessness. A single open spot on the stage represents a classroom in a minute, then a corporate office in the next, and finally a street in London or Kuwait shortly after. This rapid shifting of spaces underscores the futility of geographical escape. No matter where Indrajit runs physically, the space remains exactly the same. A blank, repetitive platform proving that all middle class spaces, whether it is office, school, or home, are fundamentally identical cogs in the same monotonous machine. We also see the relying of body over material objects. The play has no heavy props to interact with. The production relies almost entirely on the actors' physical movements, formations, and facial expressions. The focus on physical movement emphasizes the exhausting mechanics of daily routines. When Amal, Vimal, and Kamal march and or even sit in repetitive formations, the sheer physical geometry of their bodies on the empty stage highlights how humans willingly turn themselves into unthinking machines. We also see the existentialist analysis in the character Manasi. Manasi is often misread as a mere romantic interest, but through an existential lens, she serves as a vital philosophical mirror to Indrajit. In Badal Sircar's play, Manasi is not just a real person. She is also a symbol who represents different ideas in Indrajit's life. When we see the character from the Jungian perspective of archetypes, she can be called the enigma of Indrajit's psychology. Carl Jung described enigma as the ideal feminine side of a man's mind. It represents emotions, dreams, creativity, and deepest desire. Manasi represents this enigma for Indrajit. She is a mirror of Indrajit's inner self. Since Indrajit cannot have Manasi because of social restrictions, she symbolizes the person he wishes to become and the happiness he longs for. Manasi, to a certain extent, is an unattainable dream for Indrajit because she is Indrajit's maternal cousin, so society does not allow them to marry. And because of this, she symbolizes dreams that can never be fulfilled. Just as he cannot have Manasi, he cannot easily find a meaningful life he is searching for. She is definitely the voice of the society also, as unlike Indrajit, Manasi accepts social rules and tradition. She refuses to marry him because she does not want to bring shame to her family. She represents society, duty, and tradition, while Indrajit represents freedom and rebellion. In Sartre's idea of bad faith, she gives up her freedom to avoid conflict with society. What's interesting later in the play is that Manasi is not one. We have many Manasis. As later, Indrajit says that he has married Manasi, but this is not the actual Manasi that he loved once. This is why Manasi is no longer a unique ideal woman. She becomes an ordinary wife, showing how people eventually lose their individuality and become part of society's routine. This is how Manasi eventually later on becomes a source of strength. Manasi is no longer just Indrajit's romantic interest. She is a symbol of patience, courage, and acceptance. She teaches him that even if life is repetitive and has no clear destination, we must continue living with courage and hope. This is why Manasi becomes the indifferent universe, as Manasi stays calm, distant, and unchanged, while Indrajit falls apart emotionally. She represents the silent and indifferent world, showing that Indrajit cannot find meaning or happiness through another person. In this way, Manasi is more than just a character. She symbolizes Indrajit's dream, his unattainable desires, society's restriction, and finally the strength to accept life and keep moving. Let us now try to understand another interesting fact, which is why does Sircar use Bertolt Brecht's alienation effect in Evam Indrajit? Bertolt Brecht believed that traditional theatre made the audience too emotionally involved. So they accepted everything without questioning it. To change this, he introduced the alienation effect. Brecht was a German writer, and his plays had a reflection of the post-war effect, which is why he reminds the audience that they are watching a play, and he encourages them to think critically instead of becoming emotionally absorbed. This is where Brecht achieved this by breaking the fourth wall, where actors would speak directly to the audience. He would use simple sets and visible stage lights, and include a narrator or writer who comments on the action. This is how, in the play Evam Indrajit, alienation effect is just in relation with Brecht's techniques, where Badal Sircar uses Brecht's technique of alienation effect to expose the repetitive and meaningless life of the urban middle class. The writer, as the narrator, begins with the writer suffering from writer's block. He talks directly to the audience and creates the play on stage, reminding that it is a performance. He also uses similar characters like Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, who live almost identical lives, whether it is education, job, and marriage. They represent ordinary middle class people who blindly follow society. And there is a circular structure that makes the play have no real beginning or end. So the repetitive dialogues and routines show that life is trapped in an endless cycle. In the end, through Indrajit, we see the alienation effect, where, unlike Amal, Vimal, and Kamal, Indrajit questions society and tries to find his own identity. He changes his names, travels all around the world, and rejects social expectations. However, in the end, he becomes a part of the same routine, realizing that there is no escape from the endless cycle of middle class life. This is how Sarkar uses Brecht's alienation effect so that the audience does not simply feel sympathy for Indrajit. Instead, they realize that Indrajit's struggle is their own, making them think critically about conformity, identity, and modern society. So, by the end of the play, can we think of another perspective, which is, can we explain how the environment of 1960s Calcutta triggered existentialism in this play? This play was published in 1962, when the excitement of India's independence had faded, and many people felt disappointed. Indrajit's personal crisis reflects the social, economic, and political problems of Calcutta in the 1960s. The difficult conditions of the city made people question the meaning and purpose of life in many ways. Firstly, we see the collapse of the Nehruvian utopia. After independence, people were hopeful that India would develop quickly under Jawaharlal Nehru's leadership. But by the early 1960s, these hopes were shattered due to corruption, economic problems, and India's defeat in the 1962 war with China. Indrajit represents a generation that lost faith in the dream of a better future and felt confused, hopeless, and unsure about the meaning of their lives. We also see the bureaucratic meat grinder and joblessness. During the 1960s, Calcutta's economy was struggling. Factories closed, unemployment increased, and many educated young people like Amal, Vimal, and Kamal willingly gave up their individuality to become small parts of the office or government system. We also see the refugee crisis and urban decay. After the partition of India in 1947, millions of refugees from East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, came to Calcutta. By the 1960s, the city could no longer support its growing population. This led to widespread poverty, overcrowded slums, food shortages, and poor living conditions. This made every educated young people like Indrajit feel disappointed, isolated, and lose faith in a better future or a fair social system. And by the end, we also see a radical extremism in a foreshadowed manner. The silent frustration and meaninglessness shown in Evam Indrajit reflected the growing anger of many young people in the 1960s. As their hopes for a better future were repeatedly disappointed. This frustration later turned into violent protests and gave rise to the radical Naxalite movement in the 1960s. By the end of the play, we also need to understand that why this play was so important. Firstly, it revolutionized the Indian theatre. It introduced existential ideas in Indian drama, and it represented educated middle class anxiety. This is why it is still relevant today, because it questions modern success and happiness to a greater extent. This is why it is important to understand why is the ending of the play so important. As the ending is not completely hopeless. The writer and Indrajit realize that life may not have a clear meaning or destination, but people must continue living with courage and awareness. Even if life is repetitive, it should be lived consciously rather than blindly following society. So, the writer echoes Camus' philosophy of accepting the absurd and continuing the journey despite a lack of ultimate purpose. This is why he says in the end,
There is no destination. The road is the destination. We must walk, Indrajit. We must keep walking.
and Indrajit echoes the sentiment,
A long road, an endless road. Let's walk.
and that brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope it was helpful to all of you. If you like this content, do give it a like. And don't forget to share it with those who can benefit from this play analysis as well. This is me, Karishma. Until we meet next time, take care.